Good afternoon. Welcome to 30-Minute Thursday, General Ledger Allocations. This will be presented by David Powers. And if we go to the next slide, we're going to cover on our agenda today just a really brief company overview of who Apex is. And then we'll do a really brief speaker introduction, and then David's going to get into the allocation presentation, and we're going to wrap up with any questions that are that come out of this conversation. So next slide, just a quick snapshot, just a bit about Apex. We're a division of ASGN Inc., serving 300 of the Fortune 500 on all major industries. Our solutions are highly scalable and delivered nationally with over 180 unique IT skill sets in over 70 branch locations across the US, Europe, Mexico, and India. Next slide, please. And again. Without going into all 18 areas of our solution offerings here at Apex, our consulting practice offers global solutions per industry through digital innovations like Infor, Epic, and Agile. Workforce mobilization through staffing to support any size implementation, and our modern enterprise solutions cover migrations to standing up a PMO and running it for you. Next, please. Most of all, our Infor practice works with clients beyond the cloud, offering the right services at the right time. Next. Before the project, our advisory services guide the client through the selection process and assess organizational readiness through process review and design. We offer total program governance and change management services to start clients off on the right foot for their implementation. Click again, please. During the project, we offer prescriptive guidance to reduce risk, duration, and cost. Again. And after the project, managed services helps the clients to sustain their investment through on-demand service, staff augmentation, and incident support to be your partner. Click. Before, during, and after the project. So next slide, please. I'll let David present, do his introduction, and I'll turn this over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, hello, my name is David Powers. I'm a consultant for Apex. My background with respect to Lawson Infor universe is about 27 years worth of time. I started quite a while back with a restaurant company in Southern California where we implemented Lawson. I signed on with Lawson for about a decade. Had a child, so I couldn't do the travel any longer. I hope I'm not giving too much detail, but ended up resigning and working kind of a contract. And then after an appropriate amount of time of my child growing up, I signed back on with some partners, and I'm now working with Apex, who I've been with for about, this is my 10th year. I'm going to my 10th year now. So I've been around for quite a while. I live in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm not a Buckeye fan though. So and I don't have much else to say other than I guess I'll just jump into the presentation. I think we're ready to go right in.
Yep, it's all yours.
Okay, so just if you guys would like to go ahead and take note of my email in case you have any questions. If you're after this is over, you choose to implement or create some allocations, feel free to email me. I can answer any questions that you might have, I believe. Okay, how this is going to work. First of all, I've got quite a few slides. I've got about 48 slides, and I've got to complete it in 30 minutes, or N, buzzes me. But so that means I got about 30 seconds per slide. So I don't want to take up too much time, but basically up front, it's going to be some screenshots of bullet points of what the allocation overview and what makes up an allocation and other features of the allocations. And then we'll go into some screenshots of an allocation, the pieces, and you'll get to see the stuff that I spoke of, or I'm speaking of starting with right now. Uh, so the first slide about allocations overview. Allocations are journal entries basically, but they're automated journal entries that can read your general ledger. And it only reads the general ledger. It does not read any subsystem. It does include the subsystem transactions, but only from the GL tables. You can allocate actuals or budgets. You can allocate amounts and units. The allocations system code has its own system code. It's CA. Journal entries coming from the allocations subsystem, we can call it a subsystem, is a start with CA. The fifth bullet point there, GL must be set up, should be pretty obvious. You've got to have your chart, you've got to have your structure, you've got to have everything else set up in general ledger before you can create and use allocations. And each allocation includes basically the same set of components, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. Setting up allocations. We'll talk about allocations options, the elements of an allocation. So, and there's three of them basically, three general elements of each allocation. One of those elements is the source, and there's a hierarchy to the source. So it's important to know where it's going to go, where the allocation is going to go look for the amounts that you want to allocate out. Driver types, we'll talk about those in detail. Posting options, how big of a journal entry are you wanting to send to general ledger? How many accounting units and accounts do you want to post to? The basic allocation cycle, we'll go do an overview of, from starting setting up an allocation all the way through calculating and interface into GL and the allocation types that exist. Allocation options, what the allocation module will allow us to do. It will allow us to create allocations based on calculated values, percents, or totals. We allocate posted amounts, units, or budgets. The key value there is the amounts have to be posted. So if you run an allocation and you've got a release transaction, it's not going to be included in the allocation results. Control the level of detail sent to the general ledger. That's what we talk about when we use the phrase posting options. And I referred to it just a moment ago. How much detail do you want in the journal entry from the debit side and credit side? They can be considered independently. We contain source amounts from single company accounting unit accounts, multiple companies, accounting units, and account subs, a pool of GL detail using compute statements and total names. So you can grab a lot of detail in general ledger from general ledger and allocate it out. Flexibility to determine how the amounts are split out. We can use straight percentages. We can use what's called an allocation code. Think of an allocation code as you wanted to allocate out certain fringe benefits based upon the head count of a department. We can create an allocation code, put in the values of the head count, and have the allocation use that. We can use compute statements, which are algebraic statements, algebraic phrases that can go out and read total amount of department's wages divided by the entire company's department wages, multiply it by the amount of fringe benefits, and allocate that out to accounting units and accounts. The use of contra accounts, that just simply means I don't want to deplete the source of the amount where I got the source from. I don't want to deplete the accounting unit and accounts that I got the source from. So I'm going to offset it using a contra account. It's a pretty basic accounting concept. Creating allocations in steps. I forgot how many steps you can have, but you can create them in steps so that allocations running on step one the results will be useful for allocations running on step 2, 3, 4, 5, and on down the line. Okay, elements of allocation. This refers one of the bullet points on the very previous slide where I said they have basically three elements of an allocation. One is the source. Where are you getting the allocation from? We need to know how you're splitting it out, and that's what the driver is. We talked about that briefly, percentage, compute statement, allocation code. And then the transaction itself, debits and credits. There's fields on the allocation header called post from and post to. You'll see that shortly. Want to tell it how much detail do we want to post that to, and that's where that posting option comes in. The little additional information I put there, it's kind of important to know that the post from side of the journal entry that it creates is going to be the offset of the journal entry. So what I mean by that is if the source of the allocation was a debit, the post from side is going to get a credit. the post two side will get the same sign of the accounting T account as the source. So if it was a debit, it will get a debit. So I hope that's not too confusing. There is an exception to that, and we'll cover that in presentation, but generally that is true. Okay, source hierarchy. Okay, so we need to know if we're going to be setting these allocations up, where do we go to look, or how do we set it up so that I know exactly where we're pulling the source from. I didn't say that very well, I apologize. But it's a pretty simple concept. It's going to look for the source first in a compute statement. If you have a compute statement on your allocation, it's going to look for it in there. If you don't have a compute statement or the source it doesn't exist in that compute statement, it'll go to the pool override. And it's just going to look for accounting units in that case. Right? From there, it's going to look for the override tabs of the allocation. Now, you haven't seen the override tabs of the allocation yet. You will shortly. And I'll revisit this concept then probably a couple times. It'll look for the override tabs of the allocation to look for the accounting units or accounts. If it doesn't have it, doesn't find the source amount from either of those three spots, it's going to look for the post two fields of the allocation. This is a mistake. I say post to post from. Apologize that post from it looks at the post to. I'll fix the PowerPoint, but it'll look at the post to side of the allocation. Okay, driver types. This is probably our third time talking about this, but we can do a straight percentage. It can be any percent that we're allocating. Now again, driver types is how are you splitting the allocation out? You know, it can be a straight percentage. It can be an allocation code. And I'll restate the example. Allocation code could be an example of a head count of the department or a compute statement. That's an advanced allocation. We'll show you an example of a compute statement later in this PowerPoint. Again, these are driver types, how the allocation is getting split out. Okay, posting options. This is defined on the post to and post from sides of the allocation. It determines the amount of detail that you're sending to GL via the journal entry that gets generated. And here, we'll go through each one of these one by one. The first posting option is consolidate. That just means it's the most smallest amount of posting option you can create. I mean, said another way, basically we're going to get one line for the account and accounting unit on the post from, one line from the accounting unit and account on the post to. So a two-line journal entry basically. The level detail refers to accounting unit, and it's going to go look at the override tabs of the allocation. And on the override tabs, we can use accounting unit lists. We can use level groups, which can equate to thousands of accounting units. So if we use the level detail, we'll get a journal entry transaction line for each one of those accounting units, to including the single account on the post from side. Similar on the post to side, it would read exactly the same. So you're going to be posting to, you're going to blow out the accounting units that you're going to post to. As you can probably imagine on the account detail with the posting option A, it's going to read the override for the account override. And it's going to post to as many accounts as you've deployed there. You'll see those override tabs and it'll make a lot more sense. You have a lot more options behind those override tabs. So you get a lot of detail with posting to the account using the A account detail posting option. Full detail is a combination of level and account. So if you've got overrides on both the accounting unit override and the account override, you're going to create transactions via a combination of those accounting units and accounts. So if you've got 100 accounts and 100 accounting units on those overrides, that's 10,000 transaction lines potentially. I think that's correct. My math is wrong. I apologize. Hopefully that's not too difficult. We'll see this again shortly. This allocation cycle in bullet point format, the optional pre-setup. Allocation groups, I haven't talked about that yet, but they combine allocations for processing. So if you had 20 allocations in your inventory of allocations, and you want to run 10 of them as a separate group because they combine for some similar concept, and 10 in another, you can create an allocation group and run them separately. Or run the 10 together, but run the 20 in groups of 10 in my example there. Allocation codes, we've talked about that. Basically, they are percentages, and that refers to that head count. So you would set that up before the allocation. You start creating the allocation. Total names and compute statements. Total names are used within compute statements, and they represent pieces of your general ledger. For example, I might create a total name, and I will in this example, this presentation, representing wages. So the wages of a department. So um, and then I would take that total name and I build it into the compute statement, which is an algebraic formula to drive the allocation, how it posts, what percentage gets calculated for each department is what I'm trying to say there. Okay, so the next step is to create the header. I'm going to speed up a little bit because we'll see this all in detail in just a minute. Create the allocation line detail. In order to calculate the allocation, you've got to release it. You calculate that allocation using CA110. So that's the program you run. You can run that CA110 as many times as you want. It doesn't, automatically interface it over to GL. So if you run it, you don't like the results, and you find, hey, something's wrong with my allocation, you can go back, unrelease the allocation, fix it, release it again, and then run the calculation as many times as you need. It's the last run of the allocation calculation that gets interfaced to a GL, which is done on CA190, which is this next bullet point down here. And then finally, after you interface those transactions, it drops into the hands of the general ledger and gets posted with potentially the next run of GL 190. Last step in the allocation cycle is just reporting. You do have an edit listing and a control listing. The edit listing is similar to what you would run if you ran a GL 240, which gives you a listing of the journal entries, and the control listing is similar to GL 245, which would give you information about the status of the allocation. Except these are actually CA 240 and CA 210 and CA 245, I believe, are their numeric values. Apologize for not putting that in the presentation. Here's just a graphical view of the same of what I just spoke about. Here's all the optional setup, allocation group, codes, total names, compute statements. They go into the allocation, we calculate, interface, and GL takes it from there. Okay. Allocation types. There are 3 types of allocations. You can allocate actuals or budgets. Well, budget has 2 types. You can actually allocate out current year budget or next year budget. And of course, you can actually allocate out amounts or units. Okay, entering allocations. Allocations has its own flowchart. It's a sub flowchart of general ledger, GLFL.8. There are 3 tabs on it: setup, processing, and reporting. We'll look at that in a second. And when you get around to creating an allocation, you have a header similar to like a journal entry. You have a journal entry header, and then you have allocation lines, similar to transaction lines on a GL entry. Here is the allocation flowchart. It's got the 3 tabs: setup, processing, reporting. This is the setup. You have pre-allocation work up here: total names, compute statements, codes, and groups. And then this one right here is CA10. We'll click on that, or I'll show you the what's underneath it shortly. That's where you're going to create your actual allocation. Processing tab. This is your calculation job. It's what you're going to run to calculate. These are your interface. If you're going to create an actual allocation, you run this program. If you're going to create budget allocations, you can run the budget interface. In this presentation, I've only covered allocations, actual allocations. And the last tab is reporting. Allocation, edit listing, and the control listing. You'll run those. Potentially, you'll run those. I don't think you're probably going to be interested in allocation ledger so much the allocation audit analysis report. I've not run those a lot. Okay, so this is the header of the allocation right here. And you're providing information that's going to default down to all the detail lines. A lot of this information is obvious: the company, I'm creating an allocation, an actual allocation type. I've called it utilities. It has a description of utilities allocation. I did not put it in a group. So I'm not trying to run these by groups. It'll just run as part of the total company. When I get around to calculating and interfacing it, well, here at step value indicates it's going to run step one. I think we should be pretty comfortable with that concept. Step one allocations make themselves available. The results make themselves available for step 2 and 3 and 4 allocations. Automatic 0% means that lines on the allocation and we're allocating out 10%, 20%, 30% across the lines. But the percent is going to change every month. And if I want to go ahead and set this to say automatic 0%, those percentages will zero out when the allocation is interfaced. I believe it's the interface. And the allocation will release, or excuse me, the allocation will unrelease. It'll be prepared for you to add those percentages for the next month's allocation. The rest of these are labels about statuses of the allocation. And you can see the status is released. It has been calculated. It's been last updated. Right. Journal entry tab obviously gives detail about what the journal entry is going to be. Allocation journal entries are not, journal entry numbers are not automatically journal numbered for you like GLR. You have to actually give it a number. And that number is going to be used every month. So only difference, it'll be period 1, period 2, period 3. The field here is just whether it's normal or intercompany. This field that has the N in here. Source code is going to default to JE. You could use different source codes if you want, but it does default to JE. If you're going to be using user analysis values, which are for strategic ledger, or apply activities for project ledger, you have these two fields to turn on. Your base zone, if you're, I'm sorry, you back up and reset. Shoot. Okay, here we go. Yeah, if you're using zone accounting, you can define your base zone here. Journal books, you can put it into journal book. If it's a accrual entry, you would tell it's a accrual entry here by indicating reverse the transaction. Valid periods. It's an important tab. Tells you when the allocation starts and when it finishes. This is similar to recurring entries. Anybody who's created recurring entries should understand this concept very easily. It's not difficult. And then within these years and periods that are defined up here, what periods do you want this allocation to run in? So if you only wanted it to, right now I have it set to run every period. If I only wanted to run it on quarters, I'd set it for 3, 6, 9, and 12. This posting day literally is just telling an allocation that you want it to post. Like, for example, if I put a 12 there, the post day is going to be January 12th, February 12th. I don't see a lot of value in that, but that's the way that works. The last tab, attributes. Every transaction, as most of us probably know, can have 3 transaction attributes. If you want to apply that concept within the allocation, there's your fields to assign those transaction attributes. Okay, here's the allocation line, but in multiple line view. So yeah, I've got 4 different lines for this utilities allocation. I just want you to see this. This is how you can see it in the multi-line view. I actually prefer what I'm going to show you here right now, the single line view. This is how I view an allocation better. I can see what it's doing better than. This is probably, if you're going to start creating allocations, you probably work here in the single line view. And this is the basic tab of that. And now you can see some of the concepts, or some of the what I was referring to when I said allocate from side. This is the allocate from side of the allocation. Here's the allocate to side of it. Here is the account override, the accounting unit override, account override tabs. We'll look at those in detail in just a second. Here is that posting option down here. And we're going to look at an allocation in detail and see how those posting options change or affect the journal entry as we change them. Here's an example of the accounting unit override tab. I don't have any overrides here yet, but you can see if I wanted to call in more than one accounting unit into the source and potentially post to all those accounting units. I could do that here by populating these 3 accounting unit fields, or I could create an accounting unit list and populate here, or a level group and populate there in that field. That could call into hundreds, thousands of accounting units. Similar concept related to account. It even has a few more options. You can call in a summary account that could, roll up 100 detail accounts. I can create an account list. I can populate a range of accounts, ranges of subs, or account group and account sub-account groups. Again, that would increase where my source. It has the potential to affect, instead of just pulling from one account, I can pull from a lot of accounts and make it part of the source. I can also post to those accounts as well. So the journal entry would be much larger. And on the miscellaneous tab, you just have the specific activity and project category that you may want to post this line to, or whatever user analysis values that you want to post for strategic ledger, if you're using strategic ledger. These values here, step, reverse, and transaction, they default from the header. They can be overridden at the line level. More likely you won't do that, but anyways, same concept. Step 1, I'm not creating a full entry, and I am allocating an amount out. Okay, so we're going to move into, I think we're doing pretty good on time. Hope I'm not rushing or being, not very well understood, but we're going to move into a basic allocation example. Number 1.
David, this our time is actually going to be up here in 2 minutes. And this is only a 30-minute presentation. For those that have joined today, we're going to go ahead and complete this. But I understand if you need to drop at some point. But we are going to let David finish his presentation, even if it takes over. Well, it will take over 30 minutes. I apologize for that.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. Is this being recorded? It is, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Well, at least you can hear it on the recording. I apologize. I thought I had more time. Look at this basic allocation example. In the bullet points, I'm just telling you that there are no overrides. There's no compute and there's no allocation code. And I'm telling you that just so for a couple of reasons. Remember our source hierarchy, where it was going to, if there was a compute statement and if the source was in there, then it was going to look for the overrides. And if the source would be there. And then ultimately it's going to look from here, the allocate from tab over here. So in this case, that's where it's going to source. It's going to grab it just from this account unit and this account. The consolidate posting option tells me it's only going to create a journal entry to these 2, allocate from and allocate to accounting unit and account fields. So I'll go through this really quickly. This is a 2-line allocation. It finds $100 and it's posting it. Earlier I had said that the post from was your offset, correct? Here it found a debit, so you got a credit. It found a debit, so the post to got the debit side. Okay, basic allocation example 2. Again, in this case, there is an account override. There's no compute, no allocation code. So considering the source hierarchy, the source is going to be a combination of the account, which you find on this account override, which I'll show you in a second, and the accounting unit that's on the from side. So we are changing our post option here on the to side to account details. So I'm going to get transactions posting to multiple accounts. Okay, there is the account override tab being populated. So we're asking for a range of accounts from 55,000 to 55,200. Okay, here is the results. As I said, we were to all those accounts in that range. We get these debits in that single accounting unit 501, and then the offset was consolidated on the post from side, so the full 9,000 gets credited. Example number 3. There's no overrides, no compute, but in this case, we're using an account code as the driver, right? And that account code, I believe it's under this driver button. I'll show it to you in a minute. The post options in this case are consolidate on both sides of the allocation. So basically, the allocation code that I've created is based. I called it headcount. It's the example I've been using throughout this. Hopefully, you can see this. You can see I've got hard-coded values related to company and accounting unit values here. You can see it just equates to a percentage value, and those are the percentages that get posted to those accounting units in that account that's defined on the from side, excuse me, on the to side. And here's the allocation that results that get created. It's split out by all the accounts. I'm sorry, it gets split out to the accounting units on the account code, on the allocation code, and that single account to side, and it's offset to the same single accounting unit and single account on the from side. Okay, basic allocation example number 4. We do have an account override. We're not using a compute. We're not using a allocation code. The posting options are consolidate on the from side and account on the to side, and that's defined down here. You can see much more detail. Okay, I'm going to move on to the advanced allocation example. This is using a compute statement, including total names. There are no overrides used. We're going to use a compute statement. The post from option is set to level. The post to option is set to consolidate. The level override, I've created a level group called 4324 flip. And here's what it looks like. It's asking for basically all the accounting units in company 4321. Which I was wrong. It should be pulling 4324 company. The allocation works out. I'll fix the screenshot. But that is the entire company 4324. All accounting units. So here's the compute statement. Let's go through some of the pieces of it. From to right in this algebraic equation, CP total means it's going to go out and look for the current period total. This value right here, 4324 wages, is a total name. And it's basically all of companies 4324, the wages for all of the departments, right? The add from accounting unit value is a variable. It tells the equation to go out and get all of those accounting units that were in that level group that I just showed you a moment ago. And then divide it by the current period total of that same total name for the company, total company wages. So it's going to take one accounting unit, for example, accounting unit 101, it's the wages divided by all of the company's wages, get a percentage amount, then it's going to multiply it by the current period total of another total name, the fringe benefits. So I'm basically trying to allocate out fringe benefits. Right. Earlier today, I told you how the journal entry gets created with respect to debit credit. And I said that the post from was the offset and post to was going to be the same side sign of the journal entry as the source. That is true, except for this scenario right here, where, because I believe the reason is, I tried to research this earlier to get the exact reason, because I'm referencing the from side of the allocation with this little variable at FRAU. Without this -1 at the end of it, this would generate a journal entry and it would credit the departments that I want to debit. So what this -1 is why we call this flip, call this a flip allocation. I got the word right here. And so it flips the journal entry. So I get the debits to the correct departments and I credit the correct to the correct department and accounting unit. Here's just some screenshots of that total name that I created, 4321 wages. So you guys can see how they're created. Here's just the year and the name, but you can see I just called in all the level 1 accounting units. So there are 4 level 1 accounting units in this company. So that's the way I did that. There are other ways to do it as well. And then on the accounts, I just brought in a range of accounts. So that's all wages for company 4321. Here is the results of it. I'm just showing you how much it found for period 6. The allocations that I'm creating is for we're calculating for period 6, June of 2024. Dollars. Here's the total name for 4324 fringe, and same thing. I'm just calling in company 4324 accounting at 101 and the fringe benefit account, right? What I found is there's going to be $35,750 allocated out for period 6. Okay, this is the allocations results when I run that allocation. You can see that these departments are getting debits based upon those percentages that were created in the compute formula, and then the offset for the full $35,750. Okay, so that's an example of an advanced allocation. If you have any questions, I want to pursue some of those, you can give me an email. I can help you with that. This is just a screenshot of the allocation calculation. You run CA 110 to do it. You have to release the allocations before they will be calculated. If you don't release them, they're not going to be calculation. And you have all these options to run them by. You can run it by company. Up there, company group. Down here at the bottom, you can run it for a single allocation. You can run it for an allocation group. You can run it by steps. So if you had 10 steps, you want to run by 5, you can do that. You have some budget options here to run by if you should pursue budget allocations. After you run that, again, you can run that as many times as you want. It's the last run of the CA 110 that will be considered for interface, and you run the CA 110 to interface the allocations to GL. There is a closing job in allocations. It's CA 199. My experience, most clients don't set up or require to close the allocations module. Most of the people who are responsible for allocations are also the GL team. So, but if you do choose to close allocations, you have to turn system control on and require that it be closed. This is the last screenshot, and it's about statuses of the allocation. The first one is ready. It means the allocation is ready in the submodule. It's ready for processing, right? All systems go, in other words. Calculated means I've actually calculated the allocation. So I've run CA 190, excuse me, CA 110 for calculation on that allocation. Processed means I've interfaced the allocation to GL for that period. It's in general ledger now, right? No detail means that there's no detail line set up for the allocation. So you're not done creating the allocation. Unselected means that it's not selected to process that period. So think of the screenshot I showed earlier today, where earlier in the presentation, where you had those periods. And I said, if you only wanted it to run on quarters, you'd select 3, 6, 9, 12, periods 3, 6, 9, 12. If it's period 2, you're going to have an unselected status because that's not period 3, 6, 9, or 12. Out of range means the beginning dates and the ending dates of the allocation are done. So you expected it to run 2 years, it's run for 2 years. If you want to run it, for a third year, you're going to have to bump out that ending date. It just means that the allocation is basically done. We didn't expect to run it any longer, or maybe we just expect to change it on an annual basis, what the ending date is. Okay, so that's the last slide. I apologize if some of you guys didn't get to hear it all.